we're down here with Dan Gable, Olympic champion, 15-time NCAA champion at the University of Iowa as a head coach with the Hawkeyes. And it's really a privilege to be with you today, Dan, and thanks for talking with us.
Hey, yeah, I appreciate that. I'm here in Pennsylvania, and they're dominating the college scene,
Yes.
Penn State. I'm an Iowa Stater. I coached for the Hawkeyes, but I know how that transition goes, because when I went to Iowa State, we were winning national titles as a team, and then when I coached it for the Hawkeyes, we were winning national titles, and now I'm visiting Pennsylvania for a fundraiser, and Penn State's dominating right now with, of course, again, Cale was from Iowa State as well. So, Iowa State has a lot to do with the Hawkeyes and the Nittany Lions.
Yeah, and I know that'll be something we'll dive into here certainly in a little bit. But this fundraiser here tonight, the outdoors in wrestling, a lot of it can be about survival on the mat, survival certainly in the outdoors. My dad, my family were big hunters growing up. Talk about tonight. What brings you here? Obviously, it's a place you're familiar with coming out here last year.
Well, I happen to be an outdoors guy.
Right.
Besides indoors on the wrestling mat. I've actually wrestled quite a bit outside in the yard, and I've wrestled quite a bit, rolled a mat down out in the yard, but mostly it's pretty cold in the winter, and so it's an indoor sport, and I have been hunting and fishing pretty near all my life. I was born into it with a family that hunted and fished, so here I am wrestling, and it's with the outdoors.
And tonight's going to be a great night. Certainly some fundraising, some raffles going on tonight for the cause. And, one of the questions that I was thinking of before this interview, I'm just really blessed to be here with you right now, is looking back on all you've accomplished. And we were talking about it in the car ride, that if you're in the sport of wrestling, you don't know who Dan Gable is, you probably don't need to be in the sport. So that's really the truth. But your greatest wrestling accomplishment, what would you define that as?
Well, most people probably would say going through the Olympic Games and not losing a point, going unscored upon, and scoring lots of points yourself. But I feel like I pretty much knew I was going to do that. It's because of my training and how much domination I was having before that. But I would say that what gives me the most good feelings is to coach an athlete to a championship, or to coach an athlete to a victory, one that he had to work really hard in getting on that mat. And then I would say I probably don't just limit it to that athlete and his getting his hand raised. I probably always look over and look who's clapping for him, but more than that, I'm searching out for the people that love that kid on the mat. It's probably his mom, and it's probably his dad. And the look on their face when he gets that hand raised, especially in a big match, is well worth what I'm saying right now about how you feel. As an athlete, you feel good, but as a coach, you're not really in control. And when something happens like that, you go from them to the people that love them, and I'll tell you what, that's really a good feeling.
Yeah, it's almost can't put a price tag on something like that to mold someone's life, to help them reach the pinnacle of what they're shooting for in terms of goals. But in wrestling, everybody talks about the mental strength and the mental side of it. The question for you that I had is, mentally, what do you believe makes a great wrestler?
I think that he has to know how to put it out. He has to be able to kind of break the other guy. It's only a 6-minute match, could be a 7-minute match, could go overtime, or it could go less because of the falls. But I would say that if you put out everything you have in a match immediately by being smart as well, that you're going to have a chance to really take over that match before it's ended if you've trained properly and if you understand how to come on at the right times. And if you're in good condition, and you really don't even think about your condition, you just think about wrestling, scoring points, and dominating your opponent. So, I would say that mental part is probably the difference with me as an athlete when I wrestled, and then with a lot of my athletes, the mental part probably played a bigger role than their just physical abilities.
Yeah, if it's like the guy that's willing to go that much further, do a little bit more every day, becomes a lot more over time.
Yeah, you don't learn everything in the sport of wrestling. You just can't. It's like as soon as you think you got a good single leg, how good is your single leg on the other side?
Right,
It's
yeah.
usually not very good.
Right.
Usually you do a high crotch to one side, you do a sweep single to the other, or if you do the same to both same sides, then all of a sudden you think you have 2 or 3 or 4 good holds, but usually you just think, how can I double that? Well, if you could just do it to the other side of the athlete, then you got twice as many holds, and not many people can do that. I've had a few that could do the sweep single here and the sweep single here, but no. Even if it's an ankle pick, you usually get the head and the ankle, but the other times going the other way, it's not as effective. But you can work hard enough to make it as effective, but then that's just one move.
Right.
So now you got to go to move 2, and you do the same thing on the bottom, because we have to escape and we have to reverse. So you might have a switch, but the guy's riding on one side. Well, what if he's riding on the other side and you're not prepared, or you're just not quite as good? So there's a lot of factors in our sport. Nobody will be totally unbelievable on both sides, whether you ride, whether you pin, whether you take downs, or whether you're defense. You usually stagger a stance, and all of a sudden when somebody shoots on your leg, you're used to that side, and you're pretty good. You got a whizzer, you got down blocking, but all of a sudden, if he gets to the other leg, the one you have back, oh my gosh, I'm not as good.
Right.
So that's why in practice you never stop learning in our sport, and you really try to make sure that you cover all those angles. And there's so many angles that you just don't learn everything perfect.
Right. And just by talking with you right now, the energy is still high. I think our sport, wrestling is such an amazing thing, an amazing sport that teaches you life lessons, kind of like here tonight with wrestling.
Yeah, it's not just the wrestling part of it; it's the psych part of it. It's almost like you're walking down the street and somebody jumps you, and it's like, what are you going to do? Just lay down and not fight? You got to win that fight, And the other thing is that a lot of times there's the nutrition part, being able to hold up for the whole match. So you got to eat right. So they're also making weight, and you might have to learn how to understand how to lose a little bit of weight. And if you don't do it right, it's going to affect your performance. So you got to do it right from the nutrition book.
Yep.
And if you don't, you'll probably be gassed a little bit.
Probably pay for it,
Yeah. And Coach, wanted to ask as well, kind of a dream scenario. If you had to pick one wrestler, past or present, that you want to actually have a match with, even at any point of your life, who would it be?
Oh. Well, I already had that. On the wall, it said, beat the Russians. The Russians have really, if you look at the record books, they have dominated the sport.
Right.
They can't even put on Russian uniform right now and go to the World Championships or the Olympic Games, just because there's so much turmoil going on in the world.
Right.
And then there's another country that actually, the guy in my weight class was from Iran, who had won 2 Olympic titles and 4 world titles in between. So until I came on the scene.
Right on.
And so you got some countries there that are just known for their domination. USA Wrestling right now is at its highest. And part of it, the reason is because the world's kind of at war a little bit, and some countries aren't focusing on sport, and they're focusing on taken over the world maybe. But at the same time, there's been a lot of countries that have had dominant sports, especially wrestling, throughout the world. And I mentioned one of them, Russia. Before that, it was the USSR, and accumulation of all the countries. And all those little countries have been dominant in our World Championships and Olympic Games. And some of them can't represent themselves right now. But I mentioned Iran, but Turkey has a lot of history. It's just a lot of those countries over in Asia, Mongolia, they just, the wrestling's kind of their sport. But, if you look at it, we have a different style. We wrestle a collegiate, scholastic style, and then we go to an Olympic style. And a lot of people think we should just do one style, and then we would maybe do better in the Olympics. But I think the real good wrestlers that learn both styles are actually better at the total sport of wrestling. If you learn how to scramble, if you learn how to escape. Escaping is basically defensive when somebody shoots on you, and before they quite get you, you're out of there.
Yeah.
So I think we have an advantage in a way by doing two sports instead of just one wrestling sport. But at the same time, we got another sport. It's called Greco-Roman, and we haven't really been able to pick up on that sport as well as the Europeans and the Asians. So we're behind on that one a little.
Yeah, and the Olympics, certainly will be something we'll touch on here as well. Speaking of dream situations, Iowa's 15 championships, Penn State right behind them at this point. A few years, obviously, to get to you guys. But what would happen if the Iowa teams of the 80s and 90s faced the Penn State teams, the last few years for sure?
Hey, it's a dream, like you said. But you know what I hope on that dream? That two teams do get together and they have those matches again. And I don't mean Penn State should go down any to be able to have that happen. I mean, Iowa State, there's Oklahoma State just is putting a lot of effort into it, and they've come to Pennsylvania now to help their program. We've
talked about Cornell too as well.
Yeah, and Cornell. I mean, they finished number 2 in the country this year. I mean, that's pretty good considering they've always been good, but they've just not been in that top 1 or 2. And actually, there's really only one top right now because they won by 100 points.
Right.
And so I think a lot of people would look at that and say, well, one team's really dominating right now. And so we're going to go for second place. But, that's not how you think. If you think that way, you're never going to get better. Or you're not at least going to climb as fast in getting better. So right now, to close the gap, I would say that, we have some teams that are out there that should take on the responsibility of, hey, I'm going after Penn State. And so that means a lot of dedication. That means a lot of fan support. It means a lot of resources. I would hope that what's taking place right now with paying athletes and all that kind of stuff gets some kind of a lid on it to not actually end up hurting a lot of sports to where we really only have 5 or 6 teams that are really competing. And that's kind of what we do right now. And I'll point this out. I mean, we got 75 D1 programs going for a championship, but you compare that to a basketball D1s.
A lot of schools there.
Compare that to baseball. I mean, I'm following baseball right now, and baseball, I don't know, it's 350 or it's 300 or something like that. I mean, that's D1s. So, we got a long ways to go. So even though Pennsylvania is dominating, Iowa has dominated at times, Oklahoma has dominated, I got to be able to say more states than that down the future. Because when I can say more states than that, that means you're going to have more people putting more resources into the great sport of wrestling.
Yeah, and we talked about it in the car ride over here today for this great event, and this is going to be awesome night. out here with all the fans out there is, having the privilege to do Cornell wrestling play-by-play. It's one of the greatest blessings of my life. And you see the guys, we talk about Vito Rujao, Yaya Nakamahalas, Meyer Shapiro's coming up through, finished third in the nation last year. Mike Ray, as a coach, has done a fantastic job there. Rob Cole was there for a long time. I talked to Mike personally about this, where it takes that guy to come in and elevate it even further, and I believe he's done that at Cornell.
Well, that's what it takes. It takes a leader, but then you got to create a lot more leaders under you. And when you all of a sudden have each person just about being a leader itself, that's of the starters, you're in pretty good shape.
Yeah.
And because then they're going to affect the other 20 kids that are on the team, and they're going to all raise up. And so all of a sudden somebody gets hurt, you go to somebody else, the guy's ready to step up.
Yeah.
You got
Depth,
somebody,
right?
Yeah,
The depth. Yeah.
You need that, and we don't have a lot of that right now, and we need a little more of that.
For sure, Coach. And
Just a couple more quick questions here tonight, and thanks again for talking with us right here at NBC Elmira. Looking forward to this great night. Is greatest advice you've ever received, but also when guys come back to you over the years, Barry Davis being one of them as well, when they say, hey, what's the greatest advice that you gave to them as well? What are some of those recurring things that come back up to your coaching career and also as a wrestler?
I think the greatest advice is that you just don't lower the level of thinking. You're always thinking of that high level, and that gives you more of a chance to get more accomplished at a practice. Some of my goals going to a practice weren't just to go in there and get through the practice. I had goals of walking into a room, and today I'm going to score 1,000 points. And on going live with another guy, or two guys, or three guys, or whatever it took. And you weren't going to leave until you scored those 1,000 points. But you got to get pretty good before that's to happen. But maybe you'll lower that down a little bit. Maybe you can score 100 points today. And again, you might have to pick a certain partner to be able to do that. But you're going to leave that practice room a lot more of what's called just mat savvy. And you're going to have executed so many things. And practice makes perfect. And a perfect practice is even better. So I think that you don't just walk into a room and just let it go. I mean, you got hours to think about what you want to get accomplished. And that's for the high level. I mean, even the kids that aren't that, they don't think about it, they want to just go to practice and get through it, they're getting something out of it too. And the more of those guys that you have in there, though, that are of high level thinking, it's going to help them down the road, because down the road is the rest of their life. And the rest of their life, a lot has to do with the disciplines of this sport.
And that's what it is. A lot of coworkers you have over the years. Obviously, you've been in wrestling your whole life, whole career, but outside of wrestling, the non-wrestlers sometimes don't compute with the actual wrestlers of putting the extra time in, the extra hours in.
Well, again, you got to have a good coach even with wrestling, but you can't survive wrestling by just standing around waiting for a ball, because if you're on one-on-one, you're up to bat every time. You're the batter in baseball, or the pitcher. You're pitching or batting. That's the two people that are constantly again, it would be like staying up at bat every time for 10 weight classes. It's when you blow the whistle in wrestling, it's 6 minutes of something you'll never forget, or 7 minutes or less if you pin them. But off the mat, you have to build your confidence, and you have to make a weight class, and you have to be able to be in really good condition, and it can teach you life skills forever if you wanted to.
Right.
If you wanted to. So it's a good. Not all sports are that way, but some of them are a little better.
They're built differently,
A
right?
little different.
Built differently for sure. And, you mentioned the Olympics. I talked about being from upstate New York, and not too far away from the hometown of Kyle Dake. Cornell guy, obviously, and Kyle Clint punched his ticket to the Olympic Games in Paris. And if he were to win the gold medal, he could be the oldest American in wrestling to win a gold medal at 33 years old. And
Well, I'm sure he's
That's
planning
his
on
chances.
winning the gold medal.
Yeah.
I know he's got a tough Russian in there that doesn't wrestle for Russia, or if he does, it's he can't score points as far as the team. But I watched his match last year, and where he got beat was actually in some of his better positions, and this guy was really prepared for him.
Was it Sidikoff match?
Yeah.
Sidikoff.
So, I would say that Kyle probably went back to work more than Sidikoff has gone back to work, because that was a pretty big victory for him. I'll be surprised if he is the same athlete this year, and I think that Kyle will be a better athlete this year. But you still got to win the match, and you got to wrestle your style. And if he beats you in some of your positions, then you better be tougher in that position now, or keep him out of that position and get to what you need to get to win the match. So that will be a great matchup if both of them are prepared.
It all goes as planned to the brackets and all that.
And now, Coach, craziest, most wild moment in your career wrestling as a wrestler or as a coach? What can you recall that sticks out? You're like, man, I can't believe that happened.
Well, I think it's as a coach mostly, and I think it's like all of a sudden you show up to weigh-ins and somebody's not there, and then you got to find somebody else to jump in there to make that weight class. And about even if he's a lighter guy, put him in there. So some of the craziest things that I've had, and it's just people just disappearing on me, a disappearing act, magician or something, and almost all of them. In fact, I think every one of them that disappeared end up coming back and actually doing pretty well when they came. But they just needed that disappearance for a while. So you got to get used to it in wrestling, not only because of the weight making, just of the mental toughness of the sport, because it is like a little bit of a fight. I mean, if you don't put that fight in there, you're definitely not going to win. I mean, you can't punch and you can't do. There's rules and regulations, but it's like kind of throwing somebody down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Coach, my final question here tonight is your legacy. I mean, it's been talked about for many years. Is there something along those lines that you'd like to say that maybe you haven't said before about the legacy? I wish people knew that about me, because the history of Dan Gable,
Well, I think the best thing that could happen to me is, to be honest with you, I probably had 30 movie scripts written about me, but I've never really approved any of them.
Wow.
Because they always like to make up stuff in there. And I will say, no, wait a minute, instead of putting that in there, I got a story here, it's true, that trumps that.
Right.
And so right now there's a good one that might be out there. I mean, it looks like it might be. You just never know. But I liked what I read. You didn't have to make it up. It's reality, and it's good. So hopefully you can have something that can settle this country down a little bit.
I think so. Hey, and that's going to be something that people are going to want to see 100%. Dan Gable, I leave this last part open to you, as we do for all of our interviews. Is any final thoughts? I know that your advice over the years, we've seen the speeches and the discussions and the talks, and the ingredient for success that you talk about. What could you elaborate?
Well,
on that?
everybody always says, "What can I do to help?" Well, there's always something you can do to help, whether it be just talking, or whether it would be communicating with a coach and letting them know about recruits, or even if you can make a financial donation. That seems to be the line that is working right now. So you need good wrestlers, but you need a good system, and you can be part of that system. You're not going to probably come in and wrestle the guy
Yeah.
because unless you're real young, but chances are you have the ability to help with resources or at least tell somebody where they can go for resources. So communicate would help in our sport right now, especially with the new system of the NCAA handing out money to kids.
Yeah, it's a different time, and we've talked about that too. It's the future of the sport. There's a lot of growth, but there's also a lot of change.
Yeah, I think when I said that we only have 75 D1s, we got a lot of other ones. We got D2s, D3s, NAIAs, junior colleges, and they all add up to a good number, but not the number that you would think. Like I said, the number 75 doesn't compare to somebody that's got 350 programs. So we got a long ways to go.
Dan Gable, this has been awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy talking to you.
Me too. It's been my pleasure. And, tonight we'll get you out there. Great people out there waiting for you. And so thank you for the time. And, I people live by quotes. Sometimes they use them as motivation, those type of things. What motivates Dan Gable?
Well, my motivation right now is those 100 people out there and to see what I can do to help give them the opportunity to help. And so when I walk out the door tonight, I'll either have some happy people here with wrestlers.
I think they'll be happy.
Yeah, or wrestling with the outdoors, or they're going to say, wow, we didn't raise as much as we thought we could. So I got to get in there and do my job. I got to do my job.
I think your stories will be great. So,
well, hope so.
Dan Gable, Olympic gold medalist, 15-time national championship coach of the Iowa Hawkeyes, and of course, living legend.
Thank you.
See you next time.